Hi everyone, today we'll be studying about the structure of heart and the circulation of blood in it. Now let us study about the structure of heart, okay? So we have the picture of heart right here. Okay, so here we have the picture of the heart and okay. So this is a picture of the heart and first let us study about its structure. So talking about its dimensions, the dimensions are 12 centimeter into 9 centimeter, and this is almost equal to the size of a clenched fist. Now, talking about its protective coverings, this is a very rough diagram of heart, and it is covered by protective covering known as pericardium, which is double membrane. So we have to draw two walls basically. So this is a layer known as pericardium. Okay. Now this pericardial layer is filled with a fluid, which is again called pericardial fluid. Okay, now what is the function of this pericardial fluid and the left pericardium? The function is that this heart is working throughout your lives. Okay, there's a lot of contraction and relaxation of muscles without stopping. So that causes a lot of friction and causes a lot of wear and tear. But we have to prevent that wear and tear because we do not want our heart to get damaged, right? So this pericardial fluid comes to the rescue. Now, this pericardial fluid provides lubrication to the heart. Thus, when it beats, there's very less friction produced, and it prevents the mechanical damage. So, what is the function of this pericardial fluid? The function of this pericardial fluid is that it basically prevents mechanical damage in heart. Okay, so that is the function. Now, let us talk about the location of the heart. So, the heart is basically located in the center between the two lungs above the diaphragm. Okay, now the heart is located between the two lungs in our body, that is almost in the center of our chest and above the diaphragm. Diaphragm is a muscle in our body which is slightly below the lungs and it is somewhat shaped like this. Okay, let me get your picture so that you can understand it better. Okay, here are the lungs and in the center we have the heart, and there's this muscle out here just below the lungs, which is known as diaphragm, and above that we have the heart. Okay, so it must be very clear to you, I guess, by now. Now, we say that heart is located on the left side of a chest, right? Now, why is that? Now, see, the reason behind it is that the heart has four chambers, right? We have the right atrium, we have the right ventricle, we have the left atrium, and then we have the left ventricle. Okay. Now the ventricles, talking about the ventricles, they have the thickest muscular wall and maximum pressure is applied on this part of the heart. And because maximum pressure is applied on this part of the heart, the walls are thicker. And because of this pressure, we feel a thumping of the heart towards the left side. Okay, so for understanding this, we need to know that the heart is not vertically placed in the center. It is, yes, it is placed in the center, but it is kind of tilted. It is tilted in such a way that the ventricles, having the thickest muscular wall in the heart, they are tilted towards the left side. The apex of the heart containing ventricles is tilted towards the left side. Now, this is the reason why we feel a lot of pressure on the left side, and which makes us think that heart is located on the left side, because that is the area where maximum pressure is applied. Now, why is that? We'll study further. Okay, so that is all about it. Now, let us talk about the circulation of blood in heart. But before that, we will talk about the blood vessels entering the heart and the blood vessels leaving the heart. Okay. Okay. Now, blood vessels entering the heart, we first have the vena cava, which further has two parts, that is superior and inferior vena cava. Now, this superior and inferior also has other names such as anterior vena cava or posterior vena cava. Okay, and then the second one which we have is pulmonary vein. Okay, now talking about the blood vessels leaving the heart. We have the pulmonary artery, which contains deoxygenated blood. Now, why is that? We will talk about that later. This pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. The vein is supposed to carry deoxygenated, whereas artery is supposed to carry oxygenated. But this is an exception. Throughout the body, every artery carries oxygenated, and vein carries deoxygenated. But the pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein, these are the only two exceptions where the oxygenated blood, the blood vessel carrying oxygenated blood, is known as pulmonary vein, whereas the blood carrying deoxygenated blood is known as pulmonary artery. So better remember that, because a lot of tricky questions are often asked about this in the exams. Okay, so we have the pulmonary artery. We also have the aorta, which supplies blood throughout the body. Okay, now let us study about the circulation of blood in the heart, which many students find to be confusing, but it is very simple. The heart has 4 chambers, and I'm going to draw it somewhat like this. Okay, so we have the right atrium, we have the right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Now, you might think that right atrium and ventricle is on the left side of ours, and left atrium and ventricle is on the right side. But if you turn this, like if you place this on the place of your heart, okay, you'll find that the right atrium and ventricle is towards your right and left atrium and ventricle is towards your left. Why is the switching sides? Is that we are viewing it from its front, but if you view it in such a way that it faces away from you, that means that if you view it in such a way that the diagram faces its back towards you, you will observe that the right side and the left side are correctly named. It is just that we are viewing the diagram from the front. That is why we are finding the directions to be opposite. Upper body, and we have the lungs. Okay. Let us draw the blood vessels entering the heart. Okay. So first we have the vena cava. Remember, now the vena cava always enters the heart in the right atrium. The vena cava has 2 parts, upper and lower, superior or inferior, or anterior or posterior. Now, superior means upper vena cava, inferior means lower vena cava, anterior means upper vena cava, and posterior means lower vena cava. Now, anterior means the part of the body which is in the frontal part or upper part, and posterior means the part which is behind or lower part. Everywhere where you see anterior or posterior, anterior will mean the frontal or upper part, and posterior will mean the inferior or lower part. Now, the blood vessel which carries blood from the upper part of the body, upper part basically means the part of the body which is above the heart. The blood vessel which brings blood from the upper part of the body to the right atrium is upper vena cava, superior vena cava, or anterior vena cava. Now, these are names for a single blood vessel. And then the blood vessel which brings blood from the lower part of the body to the right atrium. Lower part of the body means the part of the body which is below the heart. The blood vessel which brings blood from the lower part of the body to the right atrium is known as inferior, posterior, or lower vena cava. Now, the function of vena cava is just that it picks up deoxygenated blood from throughout the body, from the cells throughout the body, and then it pours it into the right atrium. Okay, so the vena cava, we have the superior, we have the superior, and then we have the inferior, which is also known as anterior or posterior. Now this superior or anterior carries deoxygenated blood from upper part of the body to the right atrium, and this inferior or posterior carries deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body to the right atrium. Okay, so now we have deoxygenated blood in the right atrium of the heart. Now what happens is, when the upper part of the heart, that is the atrium, it contracts. Okay, now so it functions like this, right? The upper part contracts and this relaxes during that time. So the atrium first contracts and ventricle relaxes, and then ventricles contract and atrium relax. Okay, first atrium contracts, meanwhile ventricles are relaxing, and then ventricle contract, atriums are relaxing. Okay, so that is how heart functions. So now let us imagine that there's atrium contracting. Okay, now when atria is contracting, like right atrium and left atrium, they are contracting. Okay, so the atrium part, it becomes smaller. Now the blood in it needs to move somewhere, right? So where will it move? It will move into the ventricles. Now there's now blood in the right atrium and left atrium as well. But because we have discussed about the blood in the right atrium, we'll first talk about that, and then we'll see how we have blood in the left atrium. Okay. So we have blood in the right atrium now. Now because the upper part of the heart is contracting, now what happens is the contraction of the upper part causes the blood move somewhere else. That is, the deoxygenated blood brought by the vena cava in the right atrium moves towards the right ventricle because of the contraction of right atrium. Okay, now we have deoxygenated blood in right ventricle. Now we need to oxygenate this deoxygenated blood, right? So the right ventricle sends the blood to the lungs. Okay, so the right atrium sends the blood to the lungs so that it can get oxygenated. Now there's this blood vessel which is known as pulmonary artery. So we have the pulmonary artery which goes to the lungs. Okay, now this is the pulmonary, sorry about the handwriting, artery. Okay, now this carries deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs. Now although it is named as artery, this carries deoxygenated blood. Okay, now pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs. Now the lungs, what does the lungs do? The deoxygenated blood brought to it by the pulmonary artery is then oxidized by the lungs. Lungs has oxygenated air which oxygenates the deoxygenated blood in the pulmonary artery, and then we have the pulmonary vein which brings oxygenated blood to the left atrium. Okay, now although this pulmonary vein is known as a vein, it carries oxygenated blood to the left atrium of the heart. Now this is the only exception throughout the body where artery carries deoxygenated and vein carries oxygenated blood in the heart. The pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood and pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood. Okay, so now we have oxygenated blood which has come back to the heart in the left atrium through the pulmonary vein. Now we were saying about the contractions of the heart, right? Now what happens out here is that the atrium is contracting, right? So when the atrium contracts, the blood in the left atrium moves to the left ventricle. The heart has also to supply the blood throughout the body, the oxygenated blood throughout the body. Okay, so we have the aorta which does this work. Okay, so we have the aorta which arises from the left ventricle and supplies blood to the upper part of the body and the lower part of the body. So this is aorta. Okay, now I hope you must have understood how the heart works. Let us draw a very clear diagram which makes you understand it better. Okay. So this is the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Okay, and then this is the upper body. This is the lower body, and then we have the lungs as well. Okay, so now let us draw the blood vessels. We have the vena cava, bringing blood from bringing the oxygenated blood from the upper body and the lower body, and then we have the we have the blood moving from right atrium to right ventricle, right atrium to right ventricle. Now, this is due to the contraction of atrium. Now, while atrium is contracting, the ventricles relax. And now, because atrium is contracting, ventricles relax. Now it's the turn of the ventricles to contract, right? So the ventricles contract and the atrium relax. Now, when the ventricles contract, the blood needs to go somewhere, right? So through the pulmonary artery, it goes to the lungs. Now, why doesn't it go to the right atrium, right? That is a question. Now, that is when we come to the valves. Now, first, let us make it clear the movement passage of blood, okay? So, right ventricle carries deoxygenated blood. A pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs, okay? So, now we have the deoxygenated blood oxygenated in the lungs. We have the pulmonary vein which carries deoxygenated blood to the left atrium. Now, because of the contraction of atrium, we have the oxygenated blood from the left atrium reaching the left ventricle. Now, we have to supply this oxygenated blood throughout the body. So now, due to contraction of the left ventricle, the aorta, the blood has to go somewhere, right? The blood has to go somewhere. So this aorta, which carries blood from the left ventricle and supplies blood throughout the body, upper body and lower body. Now, talking about the walls of the heart. Okay, now see, the heart has 4 chambers, right? We have the right atrium, left atrium, we have the right ventricle, left ventricle. Okay, so now see, the right atrium, let us first make it clear the contraction and relaxation of the heart. So first the atrium contract, and then after that the ventricles contract. And meanwhile the ventricles are relaxing. Okay, now after this the ventricles contract, and then the atrium relax. Okay, now see, the atrium, if you see, the atrium have to pump blood only to the right ventricle and the left ventricle. It's quite nearby. Okay, so they do not need much energy to do that, because the traveling distance of the blood is quite short. So the walls out there are thin, but the right ventricle and left ventricle, the right ventricle has to supply blood to the lungs, whereas the left ventricle has to supply blood throughout the body against gravitation, that is to the upper body, and towards the gravitation as well to the lower body. And right ventricle also has to supply blood to the lungs, which is against the gravity. So that makes it very clear that the ventricles require much more energy as compared to the atrium, much more force as compared to the atriums. So that is the reason why right ventricle and left ventricle have thicker walls, which makes them send blood with a greater force, because they have to send blood to a larger distance. Okay, now see, let us talk about the valves. Okay, so we have the right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. Now, talking about the valves. First, we have one valve out here. We have one valve out here, and then we have the pulmonary artery. We have a valve out here too in the pulmonary artery, and then we have a valve in the aorta as well. Okay. So now the valves between right atrium and right ventricle and left atrium and left ventricle, what do they do is they prevent the backflow of blood. Okay, so we talked about the fact that when the ventricles contract, the blood may also go into the atrium, right, which we do not want. So that is the time when the valves come into rescue. Now when the blood moves from ventricles to atrium, these valves close because they are down facing. When the blood moves from ventricles to atrium, the valves close due to the force upwards. Now these valves close and they prevent the flow of blood into the right atrium. And the valves out here, they are facing upwards, right? The valves in the pulmonary artery, they're facing like this. So this is very obvious that when blood moves like this, they will open and let the blood move. Okay, so yeah. So we have talked about the valves in the right atrium. Now in the left chamber of the heart, we have the blood moving from right atrium to the left ventricle. So the valves allow the flow of blood out here, but when the ventricles contract, it does not allow the movement of blood in the left atrium because the valves close, and the only path available to the blood in the left ventricle is this, and these valves, they open up, allowing the blood to move in the aorta. Okay, so that is the function of the valves. What is the function? That the aortic, now okay, the valves between atrium and ventricles are known as atrioventricular valves. Okay, so this is a atrioventricular valve, this is a atrioventricular valve, but these must have specific names, right? So this is just known as right atrioventricular valve, and these are known as left atrioventricular valves. Okay, now the valves in the pulmonary artery and the aorta are known as semilunar valves. Now this is known as pulmonary semilunar valves, and these are known as aortic semilunar. Okay, now we have talked about the valves. Let me give you a brief description about them. So we have the right atrioventricular valve. Now this is placed in the aperture between right atrium and right ventricle. And what is the function of this valve? It prevents the backflow of blood from right ventricles to right atrium. And this valve has three flaps in it. So it is somewhat like this shape, faced downwards, but it has three flaps, okay, not two. So this has three flaps. That is why it is also known as tricuspid valve. And I'm not talking about the left atrioventricular valve. These valves also have the same function, and the location is the aperture between a left atrium and left ventricle. And the function is to prevent the backflow of blood from left ventricle to left atrium. Okay, now this has two flaps only. This has two flaps only, and it looks somewhat like this because it has two flaps only, and it is facing towards downwards. It is facing downwards, so it is known as bicuspid or mitral valve. Okay, so that is all about the atrial ventricular valves, and now we have the semilunar. So the pulmonary semilunar valve, it is located at the uh, opening of the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery. Okay, so the point where the right ventricle opens into the pulmonary artery, that is where this valve is located. So pulmonary semilunar valve has the location of is it is located at the opening of the right ventricle into pulmonary artery. Okay, and then we have the aortic semilunar valve, and its location is opening of the left ventricle into aorta. That's it. That is quite simple. So that is all about the circulation of blood. So now we are left with the very last topic about the myocardial infarction, angina pectoris, and the coronary arteries. Now these coronary artery. This artery is the artery that supplies blood to the heart itself, because heart also needs blood for energy, right? Blood for oxygen so that it can also work. So the coronary artery supplies blood to heart, um, and the coronary vein uh, takes blood away from heart, takes deoxygenated blood away from heart and drains it into the right atrium so that it gets oxygenated. Okay, now this is oxygenated. Okay, so now what happens is a lot of times there's blockage when there's blockage in the coronary artery. Okay, there's blockage in coronary artery. Now, in this case, what happens is because there is blockage in the coronary artery because of position of fat or something else, now the blood is unable to reach the heart properly. That is, the heart does not get sufficient oxygen. Now, because heart does not get sufficient oxygen, the muscles of the heart they do not work properly. Okay, there's deadening of the that area where heart is not receiving blood. So coronary artery has blockage in it. So the part to which it supplies blood, the part of the heart which receives blood from that artery, will not receive sufficient oxygen, right? And that area will experience deadening of muscles. Now, due to this blockage, because of the fact that heart is not receiving sufficient oxygen, we may experience a pain which is known as angina pectoris. Okay, now the pain is known as angina pectoris. Now the reason is insufficient supply of oxygen to heart. Now there's this pain. Okay, now we have the deadening of cells. Now when the muscles start deadening, we experience myocardial infarction. In simple language, also known as heart attack. This is what heart attack is. Now, when the cells, when sufficient blood does not reach the heart, no, there's no oxygenation, there's deadening of muscles, that is when we get heart attack or myocardial infarction. Okay, infarction. Okay, so that is what heart attack is. Reason is deadening of muscles of heart due to insufficient supply of blood. So let me summarize this to you. Now, the when there's blockage in the coronary artery, heart does not receive blood properly. That is why the heart is unable to receive oxygen properly, and that area of heart start deadening. Now when there's insufficient supply of oxygen to the heart, there's angina pectoris. Now this is the pain we experience while a person has a heart attack. And when due to insufficient supply of oxygen, there's deadening of muscles in that area. Now that deadening of muscles causes myocardial infarction. Now it is better you write the scientific term in place of heart attack. It will be much better to do that, because heart attack is not a scientific term, but myocardial infarction is. Okay, so that is all about the working of the heart. We have covered in this video working structure of the heart and the working of the heart, the valves in the heart, the blood vessels entering and leaving the heart. And if this video has helped you, please make sure to like the video, and thanks for watching.